Welcome everybody to Carnegie Town Hall. Today is Tuesday, October 4th, 2016, and we're here for the Council's informational meeting. I've called it to order, so is there any open discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to our presentations. Our one presentation, I guess, landfill, Diane Best, and is Trent here, or just Diane?
Trent will be coming in a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
And with me is Dustin Hanson, the
Dustin
landfill
Hanson.
superintendent.
Okay.
And we'll start with Dustin, and then I will speak as well.
Okay. Welcome, Dustin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councilors. Like Diane said, I'm Dustin Hanson, landfill superintendent. Today here we're to discuss with you, present, and Diane will co-present with me on this presentation. Changes and updates to Chapter 57, Garbage and Recycling Ordinance Revisions. First slide here, we just wanted to give you a little update or background on the landfill. I think some of you have toured the landfill, and if you haven't, I'd highly encourage you to. There's a lot of science and a lot of engineering that goes into the landfill. Once you take the hour or 2 hour long tour, you get kind of a better understanding of the landfill itself and the solid waste industry. So we serve a 5-county area, Lincoln, Lake, Minnehaha, McCook, and Turner counties. We take in roughly around 260,000 tons of waste annually. That includes municipal solid waste, which is generally what I tell people, that's your whatever you're throwing in your kitchen garbage, your bathroom garbage. Commercial waste would include like plastics and things like that. Construction and demolition waste, that anything from a new construction to a remodel, bricks, concrete, wood, things of that nature. Yard waste is your leaves and soft garden waste and lawn clippings. So we have 21 licensed commercial MSW haulers. We also have 6 more that either haul C&D only or industrial MSW. Industrial MSW can be anywhere from sludge, ash, things of that nature. So under Chapter 57, many of you are aware, but it covers landfill, commercial haulers, materials allowed in the landfill, solid waste planning board, and recycling standards. So today we've got 3 ordinance revisions that we are looking at. We've held industry meetings on these revisions back in February of this year and July of this year. An industry meeting is basically a meeting with all of the garbage haulers, the recyclers in town. We've also met with the Ordinance Review Subcommittee. That is a subcommittee of the Solid Waste Planning Board. This was originally taken to the Solid Waste Planning Board back in October of 2015, and it was approved in July of this year. So the proposed ordinance revisions that we're looking for, requirements for license, we're looking at adding commercial construction and demolition waste haulers to be licensed under this. It was a little unclear if they were needed to be licensed or not under the current ordinance. We're also going to add vehicle inspections. The landfill currently has the right to randomly inspect vehicles. Typically is what is in the load. Little things like if your blinker was out or broken windshield, but we're more looking at more of a mechanically sound inspection. The other 2 are insurance and financial assurance, and those 2 will be brought to you by Diane Best. So just commercial construction, demolition, C&D hauler, typically they will haul, like I said, your wood, your construction materials from new construction, remodels, shingles, glass, wiring, things of that nature. And we're also starting to see a lot more of the packaging material, which is typically plastics and cardboards in those loads. So under this revision, we basically would add if you're hauling construction and demolition waste, you would have to get licensed. If you're hauling it for, if your primary business, you would have to be licensed under this ordinance. The ordinance would clarify vehicle, trailer, hauling unit. And as you can see in the picture there, that is the permit number that the landfill provides to the haulers. So that way we can keep track in our system. With that, with the MSW haulers, they actually pay, for every unit, they pay $25 each year. Under this, we would only require them for their roll-off container to pay a $25 for a one-time fee for that roll-off container. And then any new roll-off containers that they would purchase, they would pay that $25 one time for the life of that roll-off. The vehicle itself would get licensed, and they would pay a $25 each year for that vehicle. The next one, vehicle inspections. As I noted before, right now we randomly inspect vehicles, and we'll still do that going forward. But this one will require the hauler to have a DOT inspection on an annual basis. That conforms to 49 CFR, Part 396. Things such as hydraulic hoses, brakes, fuel system, transmission, all those things will get checked out. And we've checked with local providers of this service, and we've seen costs anywhere from $75 to $150 per unit. And again, that would be on an annual basis, and they would have 30 days to do that if they acquired a new vehicle. And once they become licensed, they'd have to have all that completed before becoming licensed. And just some benefits from those two revisions. Safety of the public. Obviously, we have to look out for the safety of our public. We have an open system. That basically means that anybody that wants to apply for a license and meet the regulations can be a hauler in our city. And so with that, you have we don't zone or anything like that, so we have a lot of haulers on the streets of Sioux Falls. Better tracking of roll-off units with that permit number. We can save it in our system. The haulers don't have to weigh out and weigh in every time. Saves them time, saves our staff time as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Diane Best to cover the insurance and financial assurance.
Thank you. Thank you. As part of the overall review of, As part of the overall review of ordinances as they pertain to the municipal landfill, we did look at financial assurance and insurance requirements, just to look at those ordinances to determine whether updates were required, and they were. Starting with the insurance language, there is already an insurance ordinance in place for commercial garbage haulers. And that ordinance is out of date. It provides for general liability of $500,000 and $100,000 additional property damage. And that coverage is very low when compared to any other commercially reasonable requirements. It's low when it's compared to other licenses required by the city. So this would just update the insurance requirements. Most haulers, I believe, would meet that standard. And then the second requirement is a newer requirement, and it really provides an additional tool for landfill collections on accounts receivables. Of course, your tools for collections are best off communications with our customer haulers. Make sure they're aware of the requirements, make sure they're billed properly, make sure they understand the consequences. So that's one tool we have worked very hard on, and we're in good shape with that. Managing collections, as you know, we have had collections issues in the past. We do not today. We've managed collections very well. And then the third tool is good ordinances, and we do have ordinances in place that allow us to collect past due accounts, and the practice is the ordinance and the practice is that accounts cannot exceed 60 days past due on invoice charges, or they're converted to cash-only accounts. So that's both an ordinance and a management tool. And then also there is an ordinance that provides that licenses are subject to suspension or revocation in a due process hearing if those commercial haulers have accounts that are more than 60 days past due. So we do have ordinances and tools in place for the 60 days past due once a hauler reaches that point. So I'm here to talk to you about closing the gap, because what happens is a hauler, of course, runs loads through the landfill and incurs fees for 30 days or approximately 30 days before they're billed at the end of the month. Then once they're invoiced, then the 60 days occurs. Of course, we want them to pay promptly, we bill promptly. Nonetheless, they could conceivably get up to 90 days before we are either converting their account to a cash-only basis where they can no longer charge, or before we are starting a due process on their license. So it's the 30-day or the 90 days that I'm here to talk about. And we are asking the council to require financial assurance for those 90 days. And that the proposal is that we would ask the commercial haulers to provide a bond, escrow, or letter of credit for $5,000 or 3 months average charges at 90 days, whichever is greater. This is similar to the financial assurance requirements that we require for developers. Right now, developers, when they start developing a subdivision, are required to post financial assurance in the form, again, of bond, escrow, or letter of credit to pay for public improvements. And there would be the same 3 forms of financial assurance that would be used here. Now, if the haulers do not want to have a charge account or choose not to have a charge account at the landfill, that is their business. They can go ahead and pay on a cash basis, and obviously we would not need financial assurance then. So they would have that choice. The financial assurance proposal does avoid situations where the hauler would be in bankruptcy, receivership, or so forth, and the city would lose out on the 90 days of fees altogether. That's what this security is about, to make sure that we are paid fully. So that's it very briefly. The benefits of the insurance, of course, are that the change will decrease the risk and ensure that the standards are the same as other city licenses and permits. The benefits of the financial assurance changes are that it would decrease risk to the city in the event a hauler is unable to pay their outstanding balance and the city is left with that 90 days of past due. With that, I would say the Solid Waste Planning Board has voted in support of all of the proposed changes that both Dustin and I have outlined here. And we would be prepared to answer any questions at this time. Yes.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane and Dustin. I appreciate the report. A couple of questions, if I might. One, Diane, can you tell me what sort of public input did the Solid Waste Planning Board get when this was presented? And
Yes.
I assume there was a public hearing of some kind.
There was. First off, we took this to the Solid Waste Planning Board has their own subcommittee for ordinances. So we took it to that ordinance review subcommittee. The ordinance review subcommittee considered the matter, and we also then took it to actually a general industry group and invited all of the haulers to a meeting. We subsequently had another general industry group on another matter, and this topic came up again, particularly with respect to the financial assurance. So I think it's fair to say that all of these ordinances, and particularly the financial assurance, were discussed at length at a couple of industry meetings, the subcommittee of the ordinance review subcommittee of the Solid Waste Planning Board, and then the Solid Waste Planning Board itself. And the Solid Waste Planning Board itself voted to endorse these requirements at the end of July at its last meeting.
I don't think
No.
I didn't ask the question clearly enough. What kind of response did you get? What were the haulers saying
Okay,
in response
okay.
to this? I'm sorry.
Okay, yes. Well, the haulers, I think, had no objection to to my knowledge, I mean, we were not hearing anything adverse to the construction demolition licensing requirement, to the vehicle inspection requirement. It's part of doing business. The insurance, they already have it for the most part. There was an objection to that. As you might guess, the financial assurance requirements engendered a significant amount of debate. There are some haulers that are opposed to it, and mainly the concern regarding that it's burdensome to have to obtain either a corporate surety bond or to post escrow or obtain a letter of credit. There were several that attended the meetings and were concerned with it. A good number also understand the reason for it. I guess I would point out, one of the things that came up was, in fact, we initially did propose it for 6 months and pulled it back to 3 months because of those concerns. So at first they thought it was a little overkill, so we pulled it back to 3 months. We also went back and made sure that the ordinance said if you don't have a charge account with the landfill, you do not have to pay it. There are some haulers that would propose to not, that are proposing that they might pay like a month in advance, and so they wouldn't really be charging, they would be prepaying, and so they would not need to have a bond for that. And so I don't know, what their ultimate intentions are, but there's already some ways that some of them would want to work around it. We feel, in response to the concerns that it's burdensome, is that obviously it's necessary. It's necessary to be even-handed. You can't start this bonding or this letter of credit or escrow business when you've got a situation when people are already past due. That's not the time to go ahead and ask for a bond or financial security. You need to do it for everybody when things are at a licensing cycle, rather than to go back and to try and say, okay, now you're having a tough time, you need to go get a bond. And that was one of the suggestions that was made, was just wait until somebody is in tough shape and then require the financial assurance. My problem is we need to be uniform, and we don't know what event is going to befall particular haulers right now. I mean, I don't have enough financial information for each hauler to be able to predict that. So we can't predict it. It needs to be uniform to all.
So, Diane, can you kind of paint a picture for us for what has this looked like previously? I mean, we all, well, I don't know how public it is, but we're aware that there has been, well, it was in the paper now that
Sure,
I
it's pretty
think about
public.
it. Yeah. It's been a big deal in the past. In general, can you paint us a picture of the financial issues that happen across the board for us? How many businesses, how many of these haulers go out of business each year? How many end up in financial trouble with the city each year? Can you kind of paint a picture for us?
Well, as we sit here today with, based on the concerted efforts with communications, managing the accounts, working out those old accounts, we do not currently have any hauler today that is using the landfill who is past due more than 60 days. Okay. We do have one hauler, as you know, who has discontinued his business. We did obtain a judgment that has been partially satisfied. We have had other haulers that have gone over the 60 days. We've had some collections discussions with them. They've worked out those scenarios. And they're paid in full, or they're paid up to within 60 days at the present time. How many have gone out of business per year? We know that one did, that owed a large amount of money to the city. As far as whether the collection of landfill fees forced anyone out of business or that sort of thing in the past, I don't think that's the case. I think that there's been some attrition in the industry. There's also been newcomers in the industry.
Right.
So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I had one other question, but I'll yield the floor and hope it gets asked.
I'm wondering, we have some haulers here, I think would like some input, potentially. Turn on, some haulers here would like some input on this. I'd like to hear a little bit from them. Would you have questions before that? No?
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Chair. We don't generally take public input here, and we're just hearing this for the first time. I would prefer that we take it as informational right now, but it's up to the chair. But I'm just saying point of clarification.
I guess I would like to hear if they have some comments.
Could we do it
so
after council then, if I might just be so
when?
bold? Do it after the council has had its ability
Okay, we
to
can
ask
do it
all
either
the
way.
questions?
Either way. Okay, Councilor Kiley.
Trent, I think I've got some questions here from the first part of the presentation. Just so I make sure that I understand correctly, any trailers for the demolition, for the commercial construction and demolition, any trailers and roll-off units, it's a one-time $25 fee. But the vehicle that's hauling them would be subject to a fee yearly.
That's correct.
Okay, and then regarding the inspection, that's done each year. The third bullet point on that, it said vehicles would need to be inspected within 30 days after they are acquired. Can you tell me why we wouldn't require that inspection before they're actually implemented or used?
I think that was just a standard as far as giving them enough time to, if they had to acquire a new vehicle so they could continue to fill their routes. There's a lot of times the haulers got to get a new truck, but they have to continue business. So we gave them that 30 days to get that inspection done.
Would that not be part of acquiring that new vehicle to help ensure that we do indeed have a safe vehicle being used on the roadways and in this process?
Yes, I would have to agree.
Ask that you consider that. And then would the inspection coincide with the yearly license of the vehicle so that they're both done at the same time instead of different periods?
Yes, yep. We would require that proof of inspection before they would be licensed.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Neisert.
Well, I think it's important to protect the city. I also think about, I don't want to create unnecessary costs for small business, and I don't want to create barriers to entry. So that's what I'm thinking about when I'm looking at these. As far as the current requirement, so if they get beyond 60 days past due, they're converted to cash accounts. They can no longer. So I mean that's just the longest rope that they will get anymore. Correct? I mean, so we're not going to have unlimited.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so that would seem to be even-handed, as you said. Everybody's kept to the same standard, I guess. I guess I'm going to be very curious to hear from whether here or anywhere else from any haulers, particularly the smaller ones, if they think this is going to be onerous. So, thank you.
Councilor Urpenbach.
Thank you. My last question then was just to look at these rates, because I'm kind of thinking along the same lines as Councilor Neisert. In terms of these rates, we very often, when we look at rates, we compare ourselves to our peers, to other communities of our size or in our region. Have we done that with these, and how do we compare? In terms of, did we look at, I don't know, Sioux City or Omaha, or the places that we generally look at when we talk about rates? Did we make those comparisons?
For the financial assurance?
Yes.
We did. I looked at a number of cities. When we go to cities, a number of cities provide their own service, or they hire one hauler and require a payment and performance bond for that one hauler, and it serves the whole city. So it's kind of a little bit different scenario. Pierre does have two haulers that compete in the city of Pierre. They require financial assurance of $5,000 or 4 months estimated fees. Smaller city, of course. Rapid City provides its own service. Omaha is one example of one that hires a hauler and then requires a payment and performance bond for its citywide. So then, because there isn't a lot to draw from locally, I went nationwide and looked at some of the other systems. Looked at one community in Virginia requires financial assurance of $2,500 per vehicle, which per vehicle doesn't really relate exactly to the fees, but that's one example. Another one in Colorado just provides that if the account runs up to 120 days past due, then the account's permanently closed, regardless of whether payments are being made on that account or not. That's it, and that maybe is enough of a backstop that it won't happen. There's one with 2 months of waste charges, or you can go with a pay-as-you-go account, which is very similar to what we're suggesting. You can do as a pay-as-you-go account, or you can do the bond letter credit, or escrow. One community requires a complete review of financial statements in order to, I shouldn't say one does, just several do, but I'm just looking at Portland, Oregon as an example, requires a complete review of the financial statement for any credit account over $15,000.
Okay.
You know, now we're getting in people, we're getting in their business. We are, if we're doing that.
Well, so it's all over the
But it
board
is
is what you're
something we
saying.
can do.
This is not an unusual requirement compared to what you've looked at across the country.
Right.
It appears to be sort of all over the board. We would be somewhere in the middle. Thank
Right.
you.
Okay,
Exactly.
thank you. I am interested in hearing from the haulers. Is there someone? Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I didn't see his hand. Councilor Staley.
I have 3 questions for Diane Best, please. First of all, Diane, how many garbage handlers do we have in Sioux Falls?
We have 21 total, including municipal waste and CND.
Right there.
Okay.
21.
21 commercial haulers handling municipal solid waste, and then 6 more that handle construction and demolition debris. Right? Or industrial MSW. This would apply to all of them.
And are they all part of do they have some kind of a association where they all come together?
When we've had these industry meetings, we've sent them each individual notices and asked them to come for meetings. As far as an association, I'm not exactly sure what they have,
Okay.
but I know there are people in the audience that could
Okay.
answer that.
Second question, what percentage of handlers pay cash? You talked about some of them have a credit account with you. What percentage would you say?
They all have credit accounts at the present time.
Oh, because I thought that it was, so this is going to be offered to them if they want to go to a cash basis, they don't have to have an escrow account.
1 or 2 of them have indicated that they might want to try going with a cash-only system rather than having to bother with a bond. But at the present time, everyone has a charge
Okay.
account.
And then our first reading is scheduled for which date on this?
Next Tuesday, October 4.
Okay, because I just wanted to make a public statement that I think it would be, I haven't heard anything from the garbage handlers about this, so I would be open to even having a little extra time there, just so we can make sure that this is something that they have input in as well. Okay, because I don't know that any of us have, maybe some of you have, but I haven't heard from them. We'll hear from some of them today, but I think it's important that we get their feedback on this ordinance as well.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, now, we would be happy to hear if you have a spokesman to come forward and visit with us, or a couple of you would like to tell us a little bit of what your opinion is on this. Please identify yourself and might as well do what company you're with too.
Sure will. Jesse DeWitt, AOK Sanitary Service. Like most of you have said, the majority of the things that they're proposing aren't that big of an issue. The insurance, to me, I think we already carry that. The truck inspections, the 30 days, like he said before, is basically the same thing. We'll do it too. I actually just got back from, where was I? Down in Oklahoma. I picked up a truck last weekend. We ran it on the road already on Monday because we just needed the truck. So the 30 days gives us that chance to get it lettered to meet the city requirements and the things like that, the DOT inspection. I mean, the truck is definitely route ready. We inspected it ourselves, but to get it lined up with someone because their schedules are full too and things like that just gives us that break. I understand the concern for wanting a very safe truck on the road, I can't speak for other companies, but mine likes to put safe trucks on the road. We obviously don't want things falling off and leaking all over the streets, but that's why the 30 days is what they were talking about. The biggest concern that I think most of us do have is the bond insurance. For my company itself, I don't think we would have a problem prepaying. That's not a big deal for us, or even cash. I wish you guys took credit card because I get 2% back. Things like the bond insurance would, it's just another cost that you're putting on us that we would have to pass on to our customer for things like that. I guess what I would propose, and I understand what she is saying about not letting people get behind on their bill because then they're playing catch up, is that if a company in good standing has had a record, and we've been operating since 80 we're never behind. One time we left a zero off of our check and we had to come down that day to fix it, or we weren't going to be allowed into the landfill, but it was just an oversight, is that if a company, like twice during the year falls behind for 90 days and they end up in that cash account situation, maybe then talk to them, hey, your credit's not amazing. You need to have bond insurance. Something like that I would suggest maybe. But for the majority of us, like she said, there's currently zero. I would be curious to know in the past 15 years or 10 years or however far back you can go, how many companies have gone out of business owing the city. I would love to know that too, because I can only think of the one big one, and that was 5 years, which the city ordinances we already had should never have allowed that to happen. I mean, the 90 days should have been easy to catch. I can punch up my customers all day long and tell you who's 90 days out, and we do the same thing. We give them a note and say, hey, contact us by next week, or we're not servicing you anymore. I don't require all of my customers to carry bond insurance to make sure that they pay me, that I get their payment. It's just part of doing business. So like I said, but I do have my customers that most of them are billed 3 months in advance, or whatever, they get that 3 months to pay. You're coming up on 4 months, 5 months, I've serviced them. And then if that happens more than once, twice, then I say, hey, you're not handling this, we're going to move you to monthly. We take steps to make sure that their bill's not getting that big. I guess that's what I would encourage if you're looking for bond insurance. At least give the companies that are in good standing that we've been doing this our whole lives, and we know what it takes to run a business, to opt out of that with our credit being our bond insurance, so to speak, or our letter of credit, not needing to pass on an additional cost onto our customers that we already have to charge. So, any questions?
Question from Mr. DeWitt. Yeah.
Thank you. So if this bonding change were to take place, and you're guessing you'd have to increase per customer, the charge per customer, do you have an off the top of your head?
I do not have an off the top. I actually just found out about this recently through some of the haulers. I'm sure I just missed the email on the reading. I mean, things are busy for us during the summer, but I've heard numbers as high as $7,000 a month to $7,000 a year, so it could be minimal. It could be 50 cents a customer. But in this day and age, especially with like Social Security and elderly people where, you're talking about a very fixed income, 50 cents a month is 50 cents a month. I mean, the majority of people in the working force, 50 cents isn't that big a deal, but to some people it is.
Just one more.
Yep.
Do you see your competition increasing, decreasing, staying the same in your industry over the last year, 2, 3 years? Your competition, how many people you're competing against that do what you do?
It's kind of a wash. For a while there, shortly, I don't know, maybe 5, 6 years ago, it seemed like 2 or 3 were coming every year, and a few of them have fallen out. But now we basically, the best of my knowledge, we've plateaued. There hasn't been a real new licenses submitted, but no one's really going out either. So I feel like it's just hanging at 21. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Appreciate
you.
it. Did one of the other ones of you want to speak?
Greg Dix, DJ Sanitary Service. I'd just kind of like to reiterate what Jesse said, and if Diane and I have had numerous conversations about the bonding and stuff, and Jesse covered it pretty good. The majority of us feel that we would just probably go and like prepay a month, you know, like, because like back, I got in the business in '91, and the health department used to have it, and you'd get the bill and it was due by the 10th. And the way they're doing the billing now is Dustin's people at the landfill, when we pull in on the scale, they can look and see if we're 30 days, 60 days behind, if we're current and stuff. So a lot of us in the industry feel that, you know, we shouldn't have to go to that bond. So
it's hard when, I don't want to say, when someone is not as, how can I say this, as as professional and cause trouble for the whole industry. And I understand that completely. It happens everyone. And we all end up paying for it, don't we?
Yes.
We all end up paying for it. It's not a good situation, but it is a situation that we have here. And so I thank you very much for your honesty and for paying your bills.
You bet.
Any other? Yes, Councilor Kiley.
For Diane, actually, again, follow up. So the proposal is for either bond, escrow, letter of credit for $5,000 or 3 months average charges.
Right.
Can you give me an idea? I mean, is that $5,000? Does that usually cover it for most of the haulers, or does it? What
No,
is the 3 months?
Of the 21 haulers, that $5,000 would cover the 4 or 5 of them are
Only
in
4
that
or 5.
range. Yeah.
The rest would
So
be above that.
The rest would be above that, yes.
Can you give us an idea of an average?
I haven't calculated an average, but there is a wide range in the amount of landfill fees for the various haulers. And they are, as you can well imagine, a very competitive business. So it does change. But it could result in a bond where the cost could be as high as $8,000-$10,000 at the highest for a bond. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm kind of iffy and don't know is because the cost of your bond is would be a percentage of what the bond is covering. But the bond company looks at your credit history and your whole financial picture and then issues the bond. So the bond company would be the one to say, well, if I'm only going to charge you 1%, or I'm going to charge you 1.5 or 2 cents per dollar, or 1 or 2% of the dollar amount that it covers. So it's unclear exactly how much any one entity would have to pay for their bond, but I would expect to see them in that see 1 or 2 of them that would be in that maybe $8,000 to $10,000 possible range, because they're very
for the bond, but that's on a yearly basis, correct?
Right. And again, that's just a guess. They are based on their credit rating and so forth. They may pay significantly less. It will be their business between them and their bond company. I do know that on the $5,000, I can tell you that when you walk in the door to buy a bond, you're going to pay a couple $100s for a bond. And so that translates generally to $5,000. That's about the minimum size bond that you see for anything, whether it's any kind of license for anything is the $5,000. So that's about as low as it gets.
How can we get an idea of just what this may cost, from the small one-person operation to the
I've talked to the bond companies, and they've told me it's 1.5 to 2% and perhaps more if they have credit issues. And then looked at,
Half to 2% of the amount of the bond?
right.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Counselor Bach.
While you're here, can you, for us with no legal or financial background, can you describe for us simply what's the difference between those three things, surety bond, letter of credit, and escrow?
Right.
What do those three things mean?
A surety bond would be a bond issued by a corporation engaged in the business of providing bonds for licenses and various things.
I put up some cash and it's almost like an insurance policy.
It is, and those are offered for all kinds of construction, for, as I indicated, for development. License bonds are very common, grain dealer bonds, grain warehouse bonds, wide range corporate sureties are used to doing that. They do it all the time.
What would a letter of credit be
And the
then?
letter of credit actually would be a letter from a financial institution stating that that funds are dedicated at that financial institution and available for payment for that bill if a default should occur. And so it's a contract with the bank, the city, and the hauler, basically, that would require that.
I don't have to give up the cash, but I have to keep that X number of dollars set aside, sort of.
Yes.
As part of that
Yes.
agreement? Okay, and what
Yes.
about
Well,
escrow
and
then?
Some entities would be a letter of credit, really. Yeah, well, it's an arrangement with a bank, yes.
How about escrow then?
And then the escrow would be an actual dollar amount in the bank that the city could draw on, or they could actually, I mean, well, it would generally be with a bank, but it could be with a trust company or some other type institution that would hold the money for.
Right, many homeowners have their mortgages go into escrow just a little bit so that they've got
Correct.
money for their property taxes. They put a little bit aside each month. So some of us can relate to that. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Counselor Staley.
Would it ever be possible to have something written into an ordinance that would have like a violation clause? Because I hear what they're saying when they've had a fabulous history with the city. And I mean, it sounds like 99% of the garbage handlers are doing it the right way, correct? I mean, we have it in place that if they're negligent, they're going to be shut off from service.
100% that are currently using the landfill are within the 60
Okay, so there's
days.
no problem with these people. So
Right.
as far as having something where if it would be a problem for a company, then they would have to have, this would apply to them. But I can empathize with them having a good track record that now we're going to be putting this extra hardship on them.
And I know, and Greg alluded to that, we've had several discussions, and all very friendly and very professional, and we've talked about that. The issue is we need to be uniform, fair to everybody, and we need to catch that problem when it's occurring. And I don't know, we don't know for sure when it's occurring. If they're past due 60 days or 90 days, are they already in receivership? Are they already in bankruptcy? Did they get bought out by some parent company and it turned out to be a fiasco? Did their shop end up with a fire and they're just in a world of hurt? I don't know. None of us can tell in life when those things will happen. And so it may be a sudden event. We don't know.
Right, but
And
it
so
seems
this
like
avoids
it
the
hasn't, it's not
uncertainty.
really a pressing problem at this time, right? We're talking about something that could happen with a company down the road. So we're going to implement this on these people now.
Yes. Yes.
We're also, if I can, with the
sorry.
comment I made early, we're also having this because of things that have happened in the recent past. And that's why the reaction is coming now. Councilor Kiley.
Well, I would just say that it would be nice to get a little better handle on the actual cost of the bonds. I know that we have we have a performance bond, which is possibly different than what we're talking about here in one of the programs that we conduct at the South Dakota Safety Council. That's $200 a year.
Right.
And I will say that we have been operating the same program for over 40 years, and in every contract with the State Department of Public Safety, we are required to have that performance bond as part of the contract, even though we've had an excellent track record for 40 years. So I do know that it's pretty standard throughout industry to have that. So I guess as long as we are assured that it's not going to be an undue burden on the haulers, as well as then their customers too.
The percentages for payment and performance bond are very similar to the percentage that would be for a landfill security type scenario. So that's what it is. The uncertainty is some have to pay a little bit more to bond companies or have to go to a higher risk bond company. But if they all have excellent credit, they're going to be at that 2% or below. But for me to tell you exactly how much AOK's bond is or DJ's bond is, they've talked to their bond companies. They know what those fees are. They would be able to tell you what that bond amount is. The business is very competitive and revealing exactly the bond companies wouldn't, I would not be able to call a bond company and ask what if DJs has approached them and how much it would be. Frankly, that's how it is. So,
Dustin, could I ask you a question? Thank you, Diane. Can you tell me what the average hauler dumping fee is per month?
I would say average is probably anywhere from 30,000 in the middle to 200,000 on the high end.
On the high end?
Yeah.
So at 30,000 for 3 months, we're talking about 90,000, which 2 times 9 is 18. We're talking $1,800. And if it's 100, let's just say it's 100, that's 300,000. 3 times 2 is 6, so that'd be 60, or that'd be $6,000 a year. So we're somewhere on the average $1,800 to $7,000 a year in bonding fees.
Correct.
Right? Would I be pretty accurate on that then? Okay. I think that gives us a little bit of an idea of where we're at with that. And yeah, that would have to be passed on. You bet that's got to be passed on. Other questions? I'm glad we had this conversation. We have some things that we can now get out and ask the haulers, and if we have other questions of you, we would appreciate it, getting us answers, and we'll be much more informed when we get ready to vote on this. So thank you very much for your time and for your efforts, both sides, if you will. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Diane?
if I may, thank you
Yes.
for indulgent. We did schedule first reading for next Tuesday. We do know that the haulers have all been, advised of those dates. If you feel that we should wait another week and go, we can certainly do that. We were looking at putting these requirements into place for the 2017 license cycle, which begins January 1. So we would be sending out the applications in
I think we have enough time here because we also have all of this week and we have all the week after that till we get to the second reading. So we have 2 full weeks to do our research and to make a decision on as a counselor at that point. Would anybody, Councilor Staley, or you think it needs to be longer?
I guess I would ask the garbage handlers if
Well,
is
we're the
that,
ones
well,
that
I
gotta
mean,
make the decision.
to hear.
Go ahead.
If I may, we can always defer the second reading if it's an issue.
We can
by
always
the
do
time
that,
we're
too.
there.
Thank you. Yeah, good. Okay, so we'll plan on that schedule unless we decide we want to defer it. So thank you very much, all of you. Anything else for the good of the organization here? We have no fiscal meeting, and so we are done until a little bit before 7 o'clock, and thank you all for being here. Meeting is adjourned.